start with a prayer. So there is only one presence, one power, one creative force that has scattered the galaxies across the skies, holds the planets in their orbits, knows the spin of every particle, of every atom in all of creation. That great being of love and light, infinite joy, the peace that exists at the center of all of it, that unfailing, unflappable, undisturbable peace of God. And each one of us here is simply one unique manifestation of the essence of spirit. One place, one point in time and space where spirit has decided to show up in human form simply to experience and delight in the creation, to have the joy of experiencing the creation in all of those varieties. I bless the intentions and the efforts of every person who showed up here tonight, of every person who's working behind the scenes to make this possible, of everyone who is watching or listening at some point in the future. I am knowing that everything is unfolding in divine order and in perfection. I know that spirit is revealing itself to us with greater and greater clarity, leading us to greater expressions of who we are, of our greatest selves, a deeper understanding of who and whose we are. I bless this gathering, and so it is. So, our theme, as Paul has informed us, for the month is oneness, inclusion, and action. And the theme for tonight is better together. In the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to go on a journey that will take us from ancient Greece to Alabama in 1955 to your living room in the middle of this pandemic, through the psychosocial development of toddlers to the teachings of Jesus, with a passing nod to Joseph Campbell and the first season of Saturday Night Live. So buckle up. That may sound like a wild ride, but at the center of it all will be our theme, Better Together. And a central question, do we really believe that we are better together? How do we embrace and live that idea? Our starting point is two different stories about Rosa Parks. Not stories about two different aspects of her life, but two completely different versions of the story of her life. I'm guessing all of you have heard the first one because it's what we're taught in school, it's what we hear in the media. Those of you who are a little more familiar with the history of the civil rights movement may have heard some of the second version. In that first version, Rosa Parks took a stand one day that changed history. It's December 1955. A seamstress in the Deep South in Montgomery, Alabama, is heading home after a hard day's work on that city's segregated bus line. She's told to give up her seat so that a white man could sit in her place. And she decides she's just too tired. She refuses and is arrested. And the Black community is outraged. Mysteriously, flyers appear around town that very night calling for a one-day boycott of the bus system. And what follows somehow is a year-long bus boycott. As a child and a young person living in the South, when I heard the story of Rosa Parks, if I heard it at all, that was the story I heard. And then one day, years ago, I was listening to someone tell that story. And what I heard was, and that's how Rosa Parks was chosen to be the face of the Montgomery bus boycott. My initial reaction was, wait, what? Chosen? And then immediately I thought, oh, of course, because that first story is too simple, too coincidental to be the story. So here's the other story, and spoiler alert, it's not about one person acting alone one day on a whim. Rosa Parks was a seamstress and the secretary of the state and city chapters of the NAACP and a longtime activist. She had lunch every day with her friend, a civil rights attorney named Fred Gray, and they talked about civil rights. The movement was looking for the perfect place to take a stand against the Jim Crow laws in the South. And what was needed was, in the words of one writer, a volatile situation to generate anger and determination, and also the perfect spark for a flame to arise in that situation to fuel a peaceful protest. Many thought Montgomery's bus system, with its history of abuses, was the perfect place. When the police dragged a 15-year-old girl out of the bus one day and threw her in jail as an adult, even though she had technically broken no laws, the Black leaders thought they had the perfect spark. But when it turned out she was pregnant, they feared the conservative Black churches wouldn't rally around her cause. So they waited. When Rosa Parks got arrested, E.D. Nixon, the president of the local NAACP chapter, bailed her out, persuaded her to be the spark for their long-awaited protest, and people moved into action. Joanne Robinson, the president of a local women's organization, made up a flyer about a one-day bus boycott demanding better treatment of Black people on the buses. She copied 1,000 copies on a mimeograph machine at a local college that a friend let her use. Black businessmen were corralled to distribute flyers and arrange for reduced fare taxi rides. By the time the boycott happened 4 days later, a young unknown pastor with a good speaking style had been recruited to sell the idea of a longer boycott with a bigger goal of actually desegregating the buses. That young pastor was, of course, Martin Luther King Jr. Eventually, Rosa's friend, Fred Gray, took the case of 4 other protesters to the Supreme Court. And 1 year later, the court ruled that separate but equal wasn't unconstitutional only in the schools, but also in public transportation. The next day, the Montgomery bus boycott ended. There may be other versions of this story. In this moment in history, I'm well aware that as a white girl from the South, I am not the expert on the history of the civil rights movement in the United States. But the fact that these 2 stories exist in our natural discourse, and that first one is the dominant one, seems important, and that it illustrates a much larger theme. It's a theme that shows up across history, across cultures, in our own religious science, philosophy, and in the inner workings of our psyche. And that is a sort of natural tension between the importance of the individual and the importance of the group, between individual rights and the collective good, between self-reliance and interdependence, between, to use Ernest Holmes' words, individualization and oneness. It begs the question, do we really believe that we are better together? If any of you have ever taken a course in cross-cultural awareness, you've probably run across the idea that our American culture, in contrast to most of the rest of the world, can be characterized as more individualistic rather than collective. Individualistic cultures tend to value individual rights over the needs of the group, self-reliance over interdependence. In world history, individualistic cultures are pretty new. In ancient Greece, for example, the individual wasn't even a political unit. The individual belonged to the state. In this current world pandemic, we're seeing a real-time demonstration of these 2 different worldviews. As some countries quickly adopt mask wearing as the norm to protect others, while here in the United States, that epitome of individualistic culture, people who don't want to wear masks cite their individual rights or even their constitutional rights. That first familiar version of Rosa Parks' story, the fictional story of her individual spontaneous decision and the seemingly unconnected call for a boycott that followed, seems to perfectly capture that Western ideal. It reminds me of Joseph Campbell's idea of the hero's journey, the lone hero setting out on some adventure of individual self-discovery and transformation. In the hero's journey, there may be helpers along the way. There may be an expectation that what's learned will be brought back to the people who are left behind. But it is very much an individual journey. There's no denying Rosa Parks' individual act of courage. In an existential sense, she was alone in that moment, and the decision to take a stand in that moment was hers. The consequences were hers to face. And yet framing it in that way in history minimizes the impact of the coordinated efforts of dozens of people who were already involved, who stood ready to act on a moment's notice when she took her stand. As a child of the South, I'm very aware that indoctrinating school children with that first version of the Rosa Parks story doesn't just fit with the Western ideal of the individual hero. It also sends a powerful message and serves a powerful purpose. If Rosa Parks just acted on a whim and coincidentally someone else called for a boycott and a whole lot of people made spontaneous decisions to go along, then the powers that be, the white power structure that is the antagonist in that story, doesn't have to acknowledge the power that was so clearly demonstrated in that situation. The power of collective action organized around a powerful idea. The white power structure doesn't need to acknowledge the power of the American Civil Rights Movement. In that telling of history, the movement itself becomes almost invisible, and the progress it made seems almost accidental, a one-off, not something that could be recreated over and over again in that long march toward bending the arc of the moral universe. Framing the action of Rosa Parks in that way discourages people from recognizing the ways that we could all be better together. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the author of that children's classic, The Little Prince, once said, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people together and assign them tasks. Teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. Teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. He understood the power of collective action organized around a powerful idea. The night of the one-day bus boycott, when Martin Luther King Jr. stood before 1,000 people gathered in that church to ask them to participate in a much longer boycott, to inspire them to collective action and to give them the courage for the long, difficult fight that lay ahead. What was the powerful idea that he asked them to gather around? Here's what he said. I want to tell you this evening that it is not enough for us to talk about love. Love is one of the pivotal points of the Christian faith. There is another side called justice. Justice is love, correcting that which revolts against love. He wrapped the need for justice in the central Christian idea, love. For God so loved the world. He understood the power of collective action organized around a powerful idea. At the end of his speech, the church gave him a standing ovation, and that one-day boycott went on for 381 days. Ernest Holmes' big idea is the biggest idea of all, oneness, the ultimate idea of us being better together. All of Science of Mind is a story of that central paradox that we are, on the one hand, separate, individual, unique, with the power of choice, able to shape our experience with our own beliefs. We are the heroes in our own hero's journey. And simultaneously, we are a part of and existing entirely within a whole, within one consciousness, one creator. Each of us is one wave on a great sea of consciousness. We are the wave and we are the sea. Or in the words of that famous Saturday Night Live sketch, it's a floor wax and a topping. Ernest almost makes it sound simple, but on a human psychological level, it's a little more complicated. That tension between individuality and collectivism doesn't just show up in the way our culture tends toward one side or the other in its values, or in the way we tell our stories of who we are as a people. It's deeply embedded in our psyches. Throughout our lives, we experience a natural tension between that desire to be separate self-reliant, self-actualizing, and a desire to connect, to rely on others, to merge. Think for a moment about where all this starts. Think about the toddler's absolute delight in using her newfound agility to run away from mom, to escape, only to suddenly realize how far away mom is and how small she is, to run back to take comfort in mom's physical presence. As adults, our desire when falling in love is not just to be together, but to be merged. And then what follows that falling in love phase is an ongoing juggling act of finding the right balance of closeness and space, looking for it, fighting over it. In our daily lives, we buy into our cultural ideal of being self-reliant, and sometimes we don't even share with our closest friends when we're feeling vulnerable. All the studies show that the best way to make someone a friend is to ask them for a favor. But we are so hesitant to believe that that could possibly be true, to ask for help or emotional support for fear of being seen as weak or a burden. In psychology, the process of developing that healthy sense of self, that healthy balance of independence and interdependence, occurs as we face certain existential questions during the first 3 years of life. Questions like, is the world safe? Is my world, the universe, for or against me? Can I rely on others to meet my needs? Is it okay to have needs? If I express vulnerability, am I going to be judged or attacked or rejected or nurtured? Is it okay for me to be separate from you or different from you? To be and express who I really am? Can we have conflict and still be connected? Throughout our lives, we actually face these questions over and over again, often in times of transition. When we leave home, when we marry or divorce, or when we experience months of adjusting to a worldwide pandemic that forces us to be separate, even though we need each other more than ever. Your answers to those questions are the beliefs that you form along the way about yourself and the world. And those beliefs shape your experience. Psychology tells us that that's true. Religious science tells us that that's true. Those beliefs will shape your experience of your daily life in untold ways. They are shaping your experience of this current pandemic. And they will ultimately shape your ability to experience oneness as a reality in your life, and not just as a nice idea. I had a personal experience recently of an encounter with some old childhood beliefs, the kind that my practitioner would call unhelpful, and simultaneously with Ernest Holmes' big idea of oneness. Some of you will have heard the story, or part of it anyway. Recently, several of us took an oral exam as part of our journey to become practitioners. The way this day was originally described to us, it sounded like a wonderful party, people coming from everywhere, with an exam in the middle of it. But then COVID hit, and our wonderful party got moved to Zoom. It was a big day, so rather than giving into my natural tendency to do everything at the last minute, I decided to fire up my computer really early, 20 minutes ahead of time. And just as it was getting started, it died. Yes, the blue screen of death. I was determined to do the exam with a camera so that my panel and I could see each other and be seen. And then I remembered that the camera on my Zoom app on my phone wasn't working either. But across the room, still in its box, was a brand new laptop. So I decided that in the 20 minutes that I had before the exam started, I could finish getting dressed, put on my makeup, and set up a new laptop. I had absolutely no idea if that was possible or not. But 1 minute into the time that I was supposed to be on, I was logging in, I thought, except the password wouldn't work. For 25 minutes, I tried every way of entering the password. I called the number I had for our Zoom master, but she was busy setting up breakout rooms. When she was finally able to get to me, she told me I would have to use the phone with no camera. I sighed, I agreed, and then I felt myself starting to get all squinty-eyed. To put it nicely, it was one of those, oh, heck no kind of moments. I dropped into my very best spiritual mind treatment, and a little voice said, use the password for the phone connection on the computer. Well, those of you who know me will understand this next part. I started arguing with the still small voice within, because that was the stupidest idea I'd ever heard. But the little voice argued back. So I tried it, and it worked. I did my orals with a camera. I was able to see my panel. They were able to see me. And that COVID virus did not rob me of that part of the experience, at least. I reflected on all this later. At first I thought, of course, my childhood experience of not being able to get help when I needed it, of being completely alone in the world, would show up at this moment. And it showed up again. For those crucial 25 minutes, I felt completely alone with my technology. So I'm sure all of you can resonate with this, completely alone. So I thought, okay, that issue's still around. And then another realization started to bubble up. A few weeks before, when that still small voice told me to take the time to buy a new computer, even though it wasn't anywhere near the top of my to-do list, I wasn't really alone then. When that little voice told me to get on really early, not just a few minutes early, I wasn't alone then. And when my intuition told me to use the phone password on the computer, like that was gonna work, I wasn't alone then. And the fact that I was running enough adrenaline to kind of kill a horse, but still somehow was really calm, that happened at a time when every minister and every practitioner in our center had been praying for all of us all week. So that probably wasn't the result of being alone either. In the midst of feeling alone, I was able to recognize that I was being supported by my community in ways that were seen and unseen, and being supported in all sorts of mysterious ways by some sort of connection with the One. Ernest Holmes cites Jesus as an example of someone who found the truth of his oneness with God by communing with his own soul, by listening to that still small voice within. As we engage in our spiritual practices, as we commune with our own souls, it may profit us to also look at the beliefs we've adopted along the way about our relationship to self and other, beliefs that are forged in our culture or in our family life, beliefs that either support our experience of oneness or that obstruct our awareness with our experience of oneness. So as we open the discussion, I want to invite you to share any thoughts you might have that you'd like to share. I'm kind of particularly interested in how we might be experiencing that tension of going it alone, being self-reliant, versus wanting to connect and lean on others. How we are experiencing that now with all that's going on in the world in the midst of this pandemic that is forcing us to be separate in a way that we're not used to. So what I'd like to do is just have a minute or so of silent reflection to allow you to gather your thoughts, think about what you would like to say. I think that will also allow us to better listen to others and be a witness to their experience when we do start talking. So after about a minute or so, I'm going to open this up for discussion. So I'm going to invite our host to let folks indicate somehow if they want to share something. And I'm going to go in gallery view so I can see all of you guys.
Okay, you know the drill. If you want to raise your hand, you open the participants window, and down on the bottom there's the raise hand feature. Or you can just unmute yourself and start talking, or you can undo your video and waggle your hand and we'll try to find you. But the easiest way is to raise your hand in participants. And Constance is waggling her hand, so we're going to let her go first.
I can't use the participants window.
Oh, that's right. You're a host.
Well, while you were speaking, Alena, I had this because I've been doing the Me and White Supremacy book group, and today we were journaling on white-centeredness. And when you were talking about the individualism, because one of the things I wrote was, it said, "Are you white-centered?" And I said, "Isn't a fish water-centered?" You know? How can I not be white-centered on some level? And what came to me was that this individualism, particularly in the United States, is a very white-centered thing. Because all the other cultures that I've known at least enough to know something about them, they're not.
Yeah.
And so it also came to me because in COVID, I've been very much independent, very much alone. I'm not always happy about it. And I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think that we come into, at least my experience is that I came into this life with some sort of core issues to work on, and one of them I know has been self-worth. But it came to me tonight that the other issue is this one of being alone, this one of individualism, and of not allowing myself to be connected in a real, it's not that I feel unconnected, but I still keep my independence, so that's sort of what's getting me thinking about this, and how much that is part of my white heritage. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you look at world culture, that tendency of cultures to be very much more individualistic and focus on the individual as opposed to the group is pretty much an European, North American sort of phenomenon. So yeah, it's pretty white-centered.
Yeah, but even having lived in Canada for so many years, Canada is not as individualistic. Most other countries are not. There's still that element there. But certainly I know I worked with the First Nations community, and that's where I really started to understand, the first question you get asked is who's your mother? It has
Yeah,
nothing to do with what's your last name, what do you do, what have you done in life? It's like, who's your mother?
yeah.
And
Yeah, in the United States, it's almost like a false idol, that individualism.
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think it certainly hasn't served me particularly well. So,
Thank you.
um,
Anybody else? Sherry's got a hand up, maybe? But is muted.
Start my video. Okay. Thanks, Alena. That was wonderful. The context, fabulous, actually. Lots of big ideas in there, as usual.
Stuff to think about.
Yeah. I love this whole idea. I just took a class by Matthew Fox from him, and it was on St. Thomas Aquinas' wisdom for this pandemic time. And he said that back in the Black Plague, the same fight was going on between the maskers and the non-maskers. And the same common good versus individualism. And I thought, wow, he said 400 years later, we're doing this very same thing. and hopefully we're on another trajectory of more movement into it. That's my feeling. But when you asked the question of what gets in the way, I live alone, and I'm actually loving it. But I'm staying very connected also during the day on Zoom calls and with people, so I'm not all alone. And I am asking for what I need, which is different. I've never done that. I kind of very independent, right? So I just went off. Okay, I want to come back to your question. What gets in the way for me is I am a masker, and I get really upset with people who don't believe in science and who won't wear a mask. And one of those is, so judgment is what my point is, judgment of this. And so my chiropractor, I see her twice a week. I have for about 10 years. And she doesn't believe in masks. And so she just went off to join 300,000 bikers in Sturgis, South Dakota, and without masks. None of these people are going to be wearing masks. They don't believe in them. And her whole family went. So I tried everything to talk her out of it, to persuade her, to get her to my point of view. And finally, I just decided I just have to take care of myself. So, wow, you know, so here comes individual where instead of twice a week, I've now managed to go for 2 weeks while she was gone without pain. And I'm going to quarantine for 2 weeks myself, since she won't be. And I'm finding I don't need twice a week chiropractic after so many years. So I don't know where I'm going with it all, except that it's a big question, and it's tearing apart relationships that I see. It's tearing apart marriages. People are leaving friendships, and I'm not leaving my chiropractor. I need the care, but we're also friends. So I found a way to not split and not make her wrong, because I was tending to make her wrong. So anyway, if I can work with judgments, I can see the bigger picture, as you had just pulled out today. There is a bigger picture in all of this, and finding my way through it is really an important thing to do. Thanks.
It's interesting you talked about the same controversy during the Black Plague 400 years ago, and almost as though it seems like we should be further along, you know, between balancing the individual rights, the collective good. But it is like that tension really is buried deep in our psyche. So I was sort of laughing at the idea, like, and now we're showing it on our faces. But I really is about doing exactly what you were talking about, finding that balance, right?
Yeah, and then maybe collectively we are moving from that individualistic thing to the common good. I read an article that is happening by certain people who are studying it. So it's a wrenching time. Thank you.
Balance as a culture, as well as finding balance within ourselves.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, lurkers. Anthony.
I like your observations about the European cultures. Well, backtrack. Definitely American development has been based on the rugged individual. And now Constance added to that the white rugged individual. And these other cultures are very community oriented. Have you heard of the book Be Immortal by Atul Gawande?
No, I haven't.
He's a physician in a Boston hospital. The book's about 10 years old. And the whole book is about healthcare for the elderly in the United States. He covers everything, but he opens up with the individual attitude of people when they get older, because it's inbred in our society. So it's very difficult for them as we go along to get used to community. And that's been one of the obstacles that's showing up in healthcare for the elderly. I think things are shifting, and where I wanted to go is, as much as the pandemic seemingly seems to create divisiveness, I think it does create a bond. We are this business of oneness, and you know, the one and all in the wall. It's with this pandemic, that's being really forced in front of us. We have to look at that. Do I really believe this? And a couple of people here have said, I reach out, I need help. And we're doing it more so than before. Yes, there's a lot of negativity in the media, but there is a lot of good that's out there that's promoting community, reaching out, connection. I'm with several groups on Zoom. We discuss different things. And really a big word showing up is connection. So I think to add to Sherry's comment, I think this pandemic is making us aware we are all in this together. Some of us kicking and screaming, but this is one of the minor blessings of the pandemic. It's breaking down walls, and people are connecting better. That's pretty much all I have.
I was thinking as you were talking, the sense of being together, I assume that that's part of what's going on with the Black Lives Matter thing and people being in the streets so much, because in a sense, we're having a shared experience. We're all, you know, I think I've said this before, but we're all sort of in a new way concerned about our health, our families, our jobs, our financial well-being. Everyone's kind of in that same place right now. And the interesting thing that I've noticed, as people are separate and feel like they're going through this separately, I see 25 people a week, and what I've seen is them kind of marching along in certain stages, all kind of going through the same stages of dealing with this in different ways, kind of at roughly the same time. Individual experiences within that, but all of them kind of being in a certain, you know, process of dealing with it at the same time. So that's been really fascinating. So thank you.
Thank you.
And TC had put her hand up.
Yeah, one of my affirmations that shows up off and on, it cycles back in every so often, is use your resources. You know, I was trained as a child to not ask for help. And so, you know, it's been a journey to get to the point where I think it's okay to ask for help to people, from people, and, you know, also balance that with realizing they also have the opportunity to say no without me getting upset about it. But, you know, so once I got that piece of it together, it was a lot easier for me to start asking for help. The thing is, it's just not a habit, you know. I mean, like I said, I was trained as a child, and so it's not my first go-to. It's like, all right, let me just do this, you know, and I'm gonna batten down the hatches, and we're gonna just, you know, and it's like, wait a minute, you know. And I think, you know, to your point about maybe I wasn't alone, you know, when I made this decision, or when the people were praying for me, or, you know, and I've got a prayer partner now, and it's been astonishing how powerful that is. And, you know, just, I'm not alone. And, you know, it's like we text each other every day with a photo of some kind, of something pretty, and our, you know, prayer for each other. And so at random points during the day, it's just like, bing, here's a little bit of love. And, oh, let me remind you that, you know, you're connected, and the universe is rigged in your favor, and, you know, whatever it is for that week. But I think it's something that was learned, and it's something that, you know, is a process of unlearning. And as often as I can remind myself that I'm not in this alone, then, you know, no matter who is around me physically, I am not alone. I think that's just super helpful.
Yeah, knowing that, like, even if your prayer partner hasn't just pinged you, you're still not alone. That's yeah, that's always there.
Right.
I laugh because that training not to ask for help or not to ask for things. I ran across again an article I read before. They're talking about that the way to make a friend is ask for a favor. And the article starts with a quote from a guy who says, this guy at work came up and asked me to borrow $50. And I realized he trusts me. And then I wanted to be his friend. That is not what we normally expect.
Huh.
We think people will judge us, they'll be,
No.
will be a burden. Yeah. So yeah, getting over that training.
Yeah, and that was a huge thing. It's like, well, if I ask them to do something for me, then I'm casting this burden on them. And most people are like, oh no, I'll look at that for you, and how can I help you? And
Yeah.
it's shifting to realize that most people um like being helpful. I mean, that's a kind of confusing thing for me sometimes, but I'm realizing that more and more.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Oh, and that was an amazing talk, by the way. I really loved it.
Thank you.
It was well put together.
Thanks. Eileen has a hand up. Everyone knows how to use their hands. It's great.
I just wanted to thank you for the talk. It was wonderful, and it was really what I needed to hear tonight. It's so interesting because I've been a little disillusioned lately, and I had a spark of hope this afternoon. In terms of working together, we keep getting, I live way up in the hills, and it's really hot, and really grateful for a ceiling fan. And we keep getting, the alerts that the power may go off, but basically also reminders if we can all work together and just cut a little usage, they won't have to do it. And it's been 2 days that the Bay Area seems to have worked together, so they didn't have to turn off the power. And I was like, wow, I was pleasantly surprised. And, it just started making me think about, well, what other things? And, the horrible catastrophe of the fires, people are going to lose their homes. People are evacuated. People are going to need places to stay. What's going to happen in this time of COVID? Are people going to be afraid to open their homes? It's like, what is going to happen? Are we going to continue to work together, or are we all going to be fearful? And it just brings up a lot of questions. I mean, maybe likely there's a reason why we're all being tested, there's a major lesson here, and it's been interesting. It's been interesting times, and I'll just say that one of the hardest things for me to do is ask for help. I've gotten it down with maybe 1 or 2 people in my life, and comes from the old tapes, and not getting much when you ask for help when you were young. You learn to be self-sufficient out of necessity, and it's a constant struggle, but it's also, for me, just having OCSL in the community, just being here tonight, it's just been wonderful. I would far rather be here live. I can watch, the recorded convention later, but, this has been just a much, much better way to spend the evening. So thank you.
Thank you. And I remind me, as various people are saying all about all the changes we're undergoing, I think what you said really brings up a good point, which is we don't know yet what all these changes are going to be, where we're going to be called to be. We're still very much in the beginning of a process, it seems like. So riding the wave of that, being open to what the changes are we're experiencing and what the changes are that are coming. Yeah. Thank you. I think we're getting close to.
Hang on, I got a minute. I just want to say that what happens with me is when people ask me for help, sometimes they don't understand that I'm going to give them that help, because that's kind of the way I am. So, and the other way around, I'm not so sure. But in terms of giving help, yep, that's where I am.
It sounds like you wish they would know that you are willing. Is that?
Well, they should know I'm willing because I always do. So shouldn't be a problem.
And yet, it ends up being hard sometimes for lots of people. It's good to, but I mean, that's the point, that I think other people are much more willing than we give them credit for. I think that's it. So just to wrap up quickly, the question I originally posed tonight was, do we really believe that we are better together? Somewhere deep inside, we know that not only are we better together, but ultimately together is all there is. However much our culture, our lived experience might encourage us at times to be that overly self-reliant person, at the same time, we long for connection. We long to find a soft resting spot with another person, to find our tribe. We long for the thrill of joining with others in powerful movements with shared purpose. And in the depths of our souls, we long to find peace in that spaciousness and that calm that comes from having that awareness of the one that never leaves us. Saint-Exupéry advised us, if we want to build a ship, gather the people together and instill in them a longing for the endless immensity of the sea. If the mystics are correct, if we are each simply a wave on that one endless sea of consciousness, can we nurture in ourselves a longing for the endless immensity of that sea? Mute myself. There we go.
There you go. You're not alone.
I'm not silent. So let's pray. There is only one presence, one power, one great being of love and light, one essence of divine order and wisdom and intelligence, of infinite love, infinite joy, grace and ease and the peace that passes all understanding. It is that essence of perfection that is revealing itself moment by moment through each one of us as the harmony, the peace, the perfection, the wholeness, and the balance that underlies all of creation, that holds all the moving parts, all the intricate parts, all the seemingly disjointed, discordant parts in perfect harmony and balance. And we are that. We are at our essence that one being. We are that infinite intelligence and harmony and peace. We are the place where God shows up in the world, the hands and heart of God showing up in the world to reveal that perfection in everything we do. I give thanks for everything that transpired here tonight, knowing that what happened here will serve each one of us. It will serve our community, and it will serve the world in ways that we can't even know or imagine at this moment. I give thanks for that loving connection that we experienced here tonight, knowing that we will each bring a greater awareness of our oneness into our daily lives. That greater awareness of oneness will touch every person we meet and set out ripples across all of consciousness. And I am so grateful to know this. And so it is.
And so it is. Thank you, Alena.
Okay, I'm glad it didn't have to unmute myself. It's telling me to unmute myself again. Okay.
If you'd all like to turn on your cameras and we can have a few minutes to say good night to one another. Constance, did you want to attempt your thing while we're in this space?
Yes, I've got a little straw poll I'm going to put up on the screen. So if you've got a camera and you want to just click it, whether you're interested. So we've been talking about setting up weekly meetings weekly or
Blah, blah.
in an outdoor, socially distanced space, so small groups with others from the village to discuss spiritual topics. So if that's something that you would be interested in, then you can click yes, I'm interested. And if you're not, then put no, I'm not interested. That just sort of helps us get an idea of whether to move forward with this. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Great job, Alena.
Bye.
Hi.
You're playing outside.
Yes.
Hi, Freya and Laurel. Good to see you. Reverend Jeff is here.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, I know you joined us late.
I'm
Alena
sorry.
was terrific.
I figured she would be.
Yes, she is. She was. Hi, Miss Freya.
Hey.
Yeah. Hey.
Paul.
Sabrina.
Okay, I have to relaunch the.
So,
Freya.
Okay.
Who's here?
Laurel.
Peter, Sally, Alice. Hi,
Hi,
Alice.
Zoe.
Are you interested? Hey, hey, hey. Am I interested?
Hey.
Yes.
Click the yes button. Laura Lee!
Where's that?
There's no way to vote.
Hi.
I lost Get it. the vote closed real quick.
Yeah.
Launch poll 1. Continue.
okay, there's another one.
And don't
Okay.
click yes just because you think you're supposed to
All
click.
right.
La 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 la.
I think it's because I'm a co-host. I can't.
Yeah,
vote.
co-hosts can't do it, so.
Oh.
Well, kind of a long.
Thanks, Elena.
You're welcome.
That was
That was
beautiful.
that was terrific.
I could vote for Alice. I know how you're voting.
There's somebody else to vote for you. Yeah.
Hi, Eileen. Hi,
Or you
Robert.
can mail
Hi,
it
Peter.
in.
Mail-in ballot.
Marilyn, there we go.
Hi, Sally.
Why don't I have
You know
some-
how rigged that is.
Hi, Zoe.
Bye, Freya.
There's
Hi,
Freya.
Maureen. Hi,
Hi,
Reverend
Maureen.
Jeff. Hi,
Hi,
Alice.
Alice.
Bye,
Hi,
Freya.
TC.
Maureen, what's the recent on the kitten?
The mangoes. My dog is pretty high strung right now. She's like wondering what in the world's going on. But I mean, the kitty's doing great. Took him to the vet. He's 1.6 pounds.
Wow.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I would show you the kitten, but I'm walking the dogs right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Show us the dogs.
Oh, okay.
All right.
This is the one that needs prayers right here. Mango.
Mango. Hi, Mango, baby.
Hey.
Pray
Mango,
for
we love
Mango. Pray for Mango. She needs help to understand that the kitten won't
can do
take
this,
away
Mango.
her love.
The same way when we took Laurel home. So you
Yeah.
gotta.
Hi, Laurel.
Hi, Laurel.
Hi.
Okay, so Reverend Sally has availability for prayer tonight. Is that right, madam?
That I am more than willing to open up the breakout rooms if I have a couple practitioners